Very good. There you go.
Thank you very much for having us here this evening. I think it's been a pretty long day for all of us. It generally is. I feel like I've been rained on 6 times and walked around 9 sites this morning covered in mud. Just excuse me if I cough. I'm getting over pneumonia, so sometimes talking irritates me. But yes, we're working, of course, on our own country. Really, we're privileged in our team to be able to work on this country and to do a whole heap of things, particularly in my work for a bird that has a huge cultural significance, like the Glossies. So I'm sure Rach does the same about all the fantastic work which she does for us as well. We're both a part of the Saving Our Species program, and you probably know who that is, but just to remind you, we are dealing with threatened species recovery in our team, and our overarching goal is to make sure the species that we work on don't become extinct over the next 100 years, similar goals for parks. But instead of having to manage people or to see tenure, we actually don't. We ignore all of that stuff and just look at what a species or a threatened part community needs and ignore the border to do the thing that it needs as a whole to recover. So we're really lucky in that sense, and that means that we get to work with a lot of different people, and we work under a lot of different policies as well, which is good. We have 6 species of black cockatoos in Australia. You probably all know the yellowtails, which we see fairly regularly, but there are a few species that are only over in WA, and then there are some species that we have here on the East Coast as well. And it's worth noting that all of our black cockatoos are threatened species, either vulnerable or upper level in all of the parts of their range, and all of them are in decline, and the glossy black cockatoo is actually the smallest of the black cockatoos and probably the one that's declining most quickly that we know of. And I would say that because it's actually really hard to pin down population sizes for these guys. The estimate pre the big fires was somewhere around, potentially 2,500 pairs at one stage. So we got down to quite a low level. But as I said, it's really dependent on how much food is in the landscape and what's happening in the landscape that would allow us to try to pin down glosses, and the numbers are always a bit of guesswork for the species. So here, where we are, the glossy black cockatoo is in this grey polygon that overlaps with the yellowtail black cockatoo. So we do see those 2 species together, and then we don't start seeing the red tails. So you go further north or you go further inland in New South Wales. If we were looking at glossies, they would be these lovely people. We can tell them apart by the coloration of their bodies, and that's quite distinct in aging the bird. So males have red tails, females have yellow on their heads and red and yellow tails. And then the amount of barring that exists on the tail will tell us how old the birds are. And the way that they're actually hanging out and behaving does that as well. I wanted you to hear what a yellowtail sounds like. You know that one? That's a common sound, especially when it's raining, and there's lots of story about why cockies fall before it rains to tell us that it's going to rain. Some of those are cultural stories, and others are about air pressure. Depends what lovely bit of thing that you'd like to believe in. But the ones that we'd love you to be able to hear, of course, you just heard it there. Scratchy, rougher, quieter, and in the world of black cockatoos, I would say these are like the scarce cockatoos. They don't spend a lot of time yammering. Maybe they get a bit noisy just before bedtime, but they are really quiet when they're on the wing, and they're very quiet when they're down in wherever it is that they're having tucker for the day as well. So oftentimes the only way we actually find them is by hearing them crack their cones as they're eating shear. And I guess one of the things that's really interesting about the glossies as opposed to some of the other species is that they are really specialists in their diet. Some of the other black cockatoos will feed on a range of things. Glossies are really restricted, and down here, black shear is one of the primary food sources, and they don't tend to use much else. Because they're eating a food source that's so low in a whole heap of things, they have to eat a lot of it. There are really important things about glossies. They will only eat with their left hand, which is a really lovely fact about them. But they're processing about 580 cones per bird per day, and then when they're breeding, we get up to about 420,000 cones per pair of birds. So massive amounts of cones that are being eaten by them, which is why it's we can identify where they're hidden by the sorts of chewings or orts that they leave behind, and they change in colour depending on how recently the birds have come to visit a feed area. But most of the time when glossies can find a good thicket to feed in, they don't move. They don't want to waste energy zipping here and there like other birds. They just want to sit in that patch of shea and quietly feed, which is probably one of the reasons that they are so quiet. They're not inviting predation by being loud and boisterous like some of the other cockatoo species. They're really gentle, and they're quite confiding too, so they'll often sit, only 3 or 4 metres above your head, and you can get quite close and they're not bothered by it, which is really lovely for us. One of the things about glossy feed is that not all black shea oaks, you can see in these pictures, are equal for birds. Individual trees are more tasty. So there are a few theories about why that's the case. Sometimes people think that it's about the acidity of the soil. Other people talk about the protein content in the cones, but one of the things that we're starting to investigate at the moment is the genetic structure of the feed trees themselves. Because often when you watch a family fly through, they won't pick the lustrous, fulsome, big shea oak in the patch of shea oaks in the thicket. They'll actually just stop on a spindly teenage tree and they'll have a feed there, and then they'll move on with their baby, and then the next family will come stop on exactly the same tree and feed and move on. I've just watched a little tree be hit by 5 different pairs of birds in an evening, to the ignorance of all of the rest of the cones that you can see in the rest of the thicket. So that one tree was really important. And when we talk about how to propagate trees to build feed resources, we target these known feed trees, so the ones that I call them good tucker trees for the birds, and we try to propagate those with the help of all the friends at our wildflower group. And we've been planting trees all over the landscape with glossies in the Widgie Caribbean for the last few years. I'm not going to talk about that one today. But in terms of fire sensitivity, the Doralis are really, really troubled by fire. Sometimes even a lip at the bottom of the bark will kill the whole tree. And of course, that means that what we saw happen to the population when the big bushfires came through caused a huge change in population dynamics. Sorry. I just wanted to play you. This is a squeaky baby begging. Sometimes if you don't hear bones cracking, you'll just hear a whinge, like we heard those whingy chantervers outside. You'll hear that consistent whinge, and sometimes the volume of the whinge can give you a good idea about whether you're looking at a young chick or an old one. The best whingy as they get a bit older. So we haven't done the modelling on the bird habitat for the species up this end of town. It's something that I'd love to move on to next. But where we have done that modelling down in the Shoalhaven LGA, we know that for areas where the purple and blue areas are areas where we know that there's a lot of feed tree based on the plant community type, and the red is where the bushfires came through and toasted everything. And that, of course, knocked out that whole population of feed. And for a shea, we're talking, having a good time, probably about 7 years to get up but glossies will feed on them earlier than that. So what we saw in the instance here after the fires was a huge shift in the population away from the middle of Bourke National Park right over to the coast, and they started using this heathland right on the very edge of the coast, and so there were lots and lots of glossies around and being seen by people. And then this year they've just sort of vanished. People have not seen as many, and this time of the year is when the breeding season starts and they start to get really busy, and usually people are seeing them more, and it's been quite quiet until just recently, probably because all of that feeding resource that was further inland is starting to recover a bit, enough for the birds to go and use it selectively, even if there's not the opportunity for a full thicket to feed them for a full day. They can still get around, because we're talking about something that's moving 15 to 20 k's in a flight quite readily in a day. So we'll have to wait and see and keep monitoring to know whether we're going to see that shift back over to the Distala heathlands, or whether the interior is starting to recover enough to actually keep glossies going inland. But I guess one of the things that's really important is that these are hollow nesters, and if you don't have tree hollows, often when you have a lot of fire, particularly hot fire, you lose the hollow selectively. So the breeding resource will have been really severely affected, which will change how we suspect the population is going to function. And it's going to influence what we see into the future of these birds, probably put more pressure on them and it could cause the total population decline. So I just wanted to talk about the importance of your contribution to things like this. And I know that Glossy's are hard to come by up this way, and certainly they are down in the Illawarra as well. We have a bit of a patch where we don't have huge volumes of she-oak growing, and so we don't see the birds as often. But right around the edges of the park here, Grace Point being one of the places, Ellensburg being one of the places, and then as soon as we get down our way past Shell Harbour, Glossies do start to come into the landscape in numbers again. So they must pass through. And what we're looking for are those areas within the landscape where we can start to collect really good data about what's going on, because we know so little about them. We don't understand their nesting ecology on the mainland, particularly over on the islands. Yes, we do, but certainly on the mainland we don't. There's heaps to learn. It's kind of a new story for Glossies. One of the ways that we can do that is by asking everyone to tell us, getting you to promote the idea of citizen science. And we know that citizen science creates really valuable data for us to make decisions on, and we put that data into our legislative framework now as well. There's whole heaps of ways that everybody can get involved with hawkweed, with turtles, with koalas, flying foxes, all the sorts of things that you will actually see here, and things that make really important are really important for us to make decisions about what we do. And feral scan being one of the ones that I think is most important here, because that's where you will put your sightings of foxes and deer. And we know that deer are a massive, massive problem for the Royal. And the LLS will then go to that data on the feral scan database and decide how they design their control programs based on the data that's in that layer. So it's a really important thing. We think we see deer all of the time, but we need to still report them because that helps the LLS target control. So I'd say do use those things. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea about some of the things that we do with data that's being used. One of the things that's just rolling out at the moment down here, first time that we've done it in the south with bats in backyards, where we've had people reporting bat calls using little bat detectors. And I think one of the most telling things is when they've run this program before, 14,000 bat calls were reported by one landholder in a single week. Like, that's pretty amazing, right? And so when we have the opportunity, we've just come to the close of this, but if I do it again down south, I'd probably like to open it up a bit broader than some of the places that I've just had, and it'd be amazing to, if you want to put one in your backyard for a week and we can find out who's there, or in places in the Royal that you'd really like to understand more about. There are great ways for us to gather new data, and it might sit outside and complement that eco-health program that's already going on, because we do things at different times and in different ways too, reported. So I think there's lots of opportunity for you to be involved. That's really cool. How do you report your data back to everybody, and where does it go? Where does it go? Where does your data go when you see something cool? Do you tell your rangers and they put it into Bionet? It'll stay in your head, you write it in your notebook. It can't do us any good if we keep recording data there. We have to start telling each other about it so we can do the good work. And one of the platforms I would love to have advocated for was Nature Mapper, because we know that those recordings, those sightings that we see are all verified. Unfortunately, that platform has folded in New South Wales due to lack of funding and is now going only on in the ACT. So we're back to using iNaturalist. If any of you haven't used it, have a go. It's pretty good. If you see a plant or a bug or a bird or something that you don't know, you can take a picture of it, and 100 experts in the background are going to be telling you what it is within even an hour. So it's really an exciting platform for people to collect data on, and for you to learn a lot more about the things that you're seeing too. It's a great way to get lots of information. But of course, Bionet for us is the gold standard for where data needs to end up, because you might report it, to the ALA platform. Theoretically, that national platform should feed back into Bionet, but I can tell you, Dave can tell you, this data transfer is very long. So sometimes we would be waiting 5 years from when you might report a sighting into ALA so it gets to Bionet, and Bionet, everyone can use that data in Bionet to go, don't build a house on top of those cattle out, or, that important frog or whatever it is. So really making sure your data goes into Bionet is the very best way for us to be able to use that data to create change and to make sure that we protect those things that are threatened. I wanted to show you what it looks like, just so you can get a bit of an idea of all of the information that we are losing when it's not reported into Bionet. These are glossy black sightings from the last 5 years. in the locality. This is Sydney because it was one of the ones that was really exciting to me. Here's the data that we're missing just from 2 platforms. They haven't even put eBird in there. So none of that information, the blue and the purple spots, they don't exist in the world. So we can't do anything to save what it is that those species need because that data is not environment. So I'll say it a million times, we need to make sure that our data goes somewhere that it can do the good work. I just wanted to show you the royal. Look how sad it is. Right around the edge, and that's what it looks like in the Illawarra as well. And maybe some of that is because we don't have a good resource of casuarina growing anywhere in the park. I mean, you're more likely to know that than I, but they should be there somewhere. So the glossies should be there too, and you would think with the amount of people that are visiting the park, we would see them, but they are not in bionet. Either people aren't talking about it, the data not getting into the legislative framework, and they're really not there. Who knows? I need your eye.
Oh, you're talking about the yellow glossies, yeah?
The glossy black with the red tail. Anything with the red tail you see is glossy. Yeah, that's what we're after. So I just wanted to show you that little flurry down on Helensburgh. That's the best thing that I could find closest to where we were, with one record from 2025 and everything else a bit older than that. So I think there's lots of opportunity for us to do better at trying to record things, not just for glossies, but for other threatened species as well. And if there's learning that you need to try to recognise some of those signs, let us know, because we're here to help you learn too.
Some of the people in this room have all seen glossies. They might not remember, but they flew over us when we did the first bush. We were taking out those prickly pears by boat. I know you were there, Ian, because you said, what are those birds? They sound different from the yellow-tailed black cockatoos. And you played the call and you said it was the glossy black.
Fantastic. So
and that was after the fire. That was this was Northern Children's Port Hackett.
Right.
The costumes.
Yeah.
Yeah, costumes. John and Paul have been there. Tony, I can't remember.
All that data.
He was there. All these people heard them and saw them fly out of there.
All that data we have to be able to do the good work, because it can do things like say we know that there are fires coming, or we want to plan that for the production burner. The fellow was talking about there, we could go, righto, we know glossies are breeding in this time, we know smoke is going to be a problem. Has reduction burn can't go in at this time, it has to go in at that time. Or, fires coming, it's a bushfire, but ahead of that we can go and rake the next trees, because we know we can't wait 150 years for them to grow again for the glossies to have a baby. Or they might specifically drop water bombs from helicopters on those trees to protect them. So understanding where the really important key features are, like the feed thickets and the nest trees, is what we can do to actually do better. Yeah.
There's a lot of posts on social media showing that things. I was just wondering as well, our ranges. What's this? It's
Our ranges.
yeah, I don't know what it's about.
Are you ready, please? But I think it depends on everyone's workload. Because they often, I'll talk about it and they go, oh, yeah, I saw that. And I'm like, well, it's not environment. So really making sure that we educate all of us to collect that data, I think it's important.
So they're environment.
They are, yes. Yeah. So I'll just say that when you this is with us finding nest trees. So for the population, we only knew probably about the whole population from right up north to as far down south as it went. We probably knew about 10 nest trees for the whole population. So we've been really working in the Northern Rivers down south and in our area to see if we can find more nest trees.
Yes. This is your previous slide.
Yeah.
You cut off Oxford.
Yeah.
There's a Casuarina reticulata right along the coast.
They do eat that.
Right. So there's possibility that you get none of any sightings.
There's a couple of sighting production. So this is me standing in Tomarong, which is where I started looking for nest trees when I found a hotspot of activity. With all of the neighbours who were like, what are you doing on our street? And so I spent a year and a half in the breeding season standing on their driveways looking at where the birds were flying at night. We have lots of, records, and we managed to find 3 nest trees in 2024 breeding season, which was really exciting given how few nest trees we know and how little we know of nesting ecology. So it really does work when you put your eyes to something to be able to do the good work. And because of that, we're actually trying to extend the border of the national park to encompass some of those nest trees and make sure they're protected, which is better. I just wanted to quickly show you what it looks like when glossies are nesting. They like this very vertical pipe. a lot of the time, and that like all of our hollow nesters, they love to do the same thing again and again. So they're going to come back to these trees because there are so few of them for a start, and because they like that one. So this girl, they've taken pictures of her every year, and they've got a picture of her sitting with her feet like that every year for the last 4 or 5 years. So it doesn't mean that she breeds every year. It's usually every second year for glossies on the mainland here, but she'll come back and have a look to see if the hollow's still good, and then hopefully we'll see a breed coming out of it. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say about that is when you find one glossy nest, you might be on the money to find others because these guys are cluster nested. So usually we would expect within 100 metres it might be that there are other nests there as well. So really exciting to see where birds are drinking, because that's how we find the nests. Follow them, because once they've had a drink at night time, they beeline straight back to the next hollow. So following along that track of flight, very directional flight in the evening is how we find these things. That'll just show you what it's like when I have a fledge, because it's beautiful. So once they come out of the hollow, they don't go back in, and this is your young one just about to go, and mum and dad are here calling it. Yeah, it's windy like many of the babies. Can we? Right into it, and you see mum and dad pick it up and they go off together. It's really nice. So you don't see that very often. That's from Kangaroo Island. Yeah.
That's great to make.
Yeah. So what happens when we don't have any tree hollows? I could bang on about tree hollows forever. You probably don't need to hear me talk about that. We have a nest box project that's been going on in the Caribbean. I would say it's been really unsuccessful for the past 5 years, but you can see some things that like our nest boxes. Can you see what's in there? And wood duck and antechinus and owl. So some things like the nest boxes, this is what we want to see in there that we never get to see, unfortunately, but we also sometimes get to see other good things. So that's greater glider. And we know that greater gliders have taken up 4 of our nest boxes up on the tablelands and are staying there permanently. So can't all be bad. It's just not glossy. So I thought I'd just run through a couple of things that I had thought about, which makes the urban and peri-urban spaces next to green space so important for these birds, because Casuarina are not a tree that we value. We look at it and go, and it's called she oak because it was weak and spindly, you know. But it's the only thing that's going to keep these glossies here. So I think that there's actually a really important thing that we need to do is think about their value of she oaks when we see the ads coming in. But then the people look at it and go, she oak, don't worry about it. What I often hear the council say is, here's a she oak that we want to cut down, and we know the glossies bring their baby and they feed on this tree sequentially every year, but I can see more she oak over there, so this she oak's not important, so we can cut it down. That's changing the learning patterns, and we know that that preference for that individual tree is the thing that's been compromised. So the good tucker tree is gone. So really understanding where those, mapping those good tucker trees is an important part of it. Make sure when we revegetate, we don't just plant she oak, we plant the good tucker trees. Making sure that we're always promoting corridors and thinking about where we can put trees in the landscape to create those corridors. Making sure that we shield trees from accidental clearing, which happens quite a lot for she oak as well because it is not valued. Making sure that glossies can come down and have a bit of a sip from somewhere that's safe in the afternoons, and of course always championing our hollow-bearing trees, because that's the only way we're going to get a baby for these things on the mainland. Making sure that we encourage our local government to include glossies as important birds, as significant species when they're actually planning, which means not just looking at the nest hollow, but making sure that feed tree thickets are protected, because that's not something on anybody's radar. As for our owls and their roosting zones, no one cares about that. All they care about is the breeding hollow, but the roost zone is as important, and for glossies, the feed thicket is as important. And really making sure that we talk about glossies so everybody knows how fantastic they are. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Consider becoming a volunteer yourself to help keep this iconic gem for future generations.